In this film on cacti and succulent cultivation, I'm going to be talking about where to grow our plants and share a few tips as to where might be the best place. I'm making this film in midwinter in England. It's coming up to the winter solstice and light levels are really low and it's dark as well. It's hardly the best growing conditions for cacti or succulents. And plants do need light to grow after all, unless they're actually dormant. Now, if they don't have enough light to grow, they become what's known as etiolated. And I have an Echeveria here that's particularly leggy. And the reason for that is, although it was growing on a south-facing sunny windowsill, it was growing in the shade of a much larger Echeveria, and it wasn't getting enough light, and so it's drawn itself out to reach for light. And as a consequence, to my mind, that looks rather unhealthy. But I can restore it by taking a cutting off the top of it and starting it again. So that's good news. In nature, of course, most cacti and succulents come from semi-arid areas, semi-deserts, savannas, and even mountainous areas as well. But where there's higher sunshine levels and long daylight length, or certainly longer than in England, a complete contrast to here, in fact. Most plants, though, do have a seasonal dry period, so when there's no rain falling, and they go into a dormancy at that time. And that can be a great help to us, because if we can mimic that, we can match that up to our winter time, which is the worst time for the plants to grow. So during the winter, we try and let most of our cacti and succulents go dormant. And that's great. And one thing that can be a massive advantage to us in terms of space is that it does mean we could actually store plants in the winter time in less bright areas. So if you're lucky enough to have an outdoor growing space, such as an outdoor terrace or patio or garden, then you might be able to grow cacti and succulents outside and then bring them inside in the winter. So this money plant, for example, goes outside in the spring, and then I bring it in the autumn. As soon as there's a danger of frost, it comes inside. During the course of the winter, I don't water it at all so that it doesn't become etiolated like this Echeveria. Of course, you could grow many cacti and succulents outside, and that's a great space-saving thing to do. And then you could just bring them inside for the winter time. And you may have other places where you could store plants, and if you've got a greenhouse, for example, and it's warm enough, then you might be able to put them underneath staging, that kind of thing. So it does give you more options. But as mentioned in my video, What's in a Name, it's great if you can find out where your plant is actually from. And then you can work out what kind of habitat it actually likes and whether it's a bit more forgiving. So for example, does it really need full sunlight? In which case the best way to imitate that would be the south-facing side of a house in England, south-facing windowsill. Or is it more tolerant? Perhaps it can grow in the shade of cliffs, in the shade of other plants, in which case other aspects or areas of the house might suit it. So some examples of those, plants like gasterias and also Horwarvias may end up growing underneath shrubs or adjacent to rocks in their natural environment. And of course, where it's really, really bright, some plants will actually enjoy that better than being in the full sunshine. So with these particular plants, I grow them on a north-facing windowsill and they thrive. I don't water them in winter. They flower very well and they're a nice shape, so that's a good indication that they're healthy. If they were to go into a south-facing windowsill, they would probably thrive just as well. And what you will notice is the difference in the strong markings of the leaves. And you'll probably find that in full sunlight, some of these plants would be a lot darker. One of the best examples of that is mother-in-law's tongue, Sansevierias, which in the UK, in Queen Victoria's time, these are introduced as being plants that could be grown in the darkest corners of people's living rooms, for example. And that is exactly how I grow this one. It's not even by a window, and it's thriving. In its natural environment, it could end up being in a very dark environment, for example, growing in a shady ravine. But equally, it could be exposed to full sunlight. And if that was the case, it would probably look a lot more desiccated and a lot darker as well. But it still would be thriving. So that's the beauty of some of these plants, is you actually have a choice. But if you're looking to save space, then there are a number like this that will tolerate shadier conditions. Another group of plants that will tolerate shadier conditions and sometimes even thrive are the group of epiphytes, such as the Christmas cacti, which this one is, it's coming into bud now, or the Easter cacti and epiphyllums. Again, they are actually quite forgiving, because in the natural habitat they grow perched on trees, for example, and by chance some might be exposed to full sunshine, some might be underneath a canopy of leaves, so then they'd be shaded. So actually you could grow this in any number of places. In order for them to flower well, they probably need something in between. But you'll probably get flowers in any of those circumstances as well. And if in full sunlight, the leaves will be a lot darker. The plants will look stressed. They'll look quite different. So a lot of this depends on what you want your plants to look like. And if you've got space, of course, you could move your plants from one area to another to get a feel for how they will change over time. And then you can make your decision as to how you prefer the plants to look. Another plants from tropical areas are the Hoyas as well. So these tolerate shady conditions too. These ones are always grown in this room. This is the darkest room in the house, north facing. Surprisingly chilly as well in here. There's one radiator, throws out a little bit of heat, and they flower really well. Another good example of a plant that could be grown almost anywhere in your house. This one normally grows in a hanging basket on a wall, not even near a windowsill, and is relatively healthy. But even with this, you can actually see that it is drawn out. Now, if that was close to a sunny windowsill, it wouldn't quite look like that. But I think aesthetically, that one looks okay to my mind. Now we come on to the more traditional cacti and succulents, which at the end of the day are probably the majority. And many of these really do like bright sunshine. So if you're limited by space, ideally a south-facing windowsill, but west or east might be fine. I grow many mammillarias on the east-facing windowsill here, and they're perfectly okay. These two grow on a south-facing windowsill and have got a lovely shape as a result of that. Again, I don't normally water them in the winter time, so they all have their dormant period. That said, I would make an exception if the plants on a windowsill were above a radiator where there's perhaps excess heat. Depending on what plants they are, I might just give them a little drop of water so they don't physically bake, but that can be helpful. I have an Anonium here. Many of them come from the Canary Islands, where the climate is a bit different. So they're used to getting rain in the winter time. It's cooler there, and that's their growing season and the time when they flower. So if we want to imitate that, we have to try and give them the right conditions, and that's a bit more tricky in a Northern European environment like this. So with that particular plant, I grow it on a south-facing windowsill where it does at the least get maximum sunshine in the winter, and I do water it as well. And at the moment it has just flowered and it's in full growth. It looks really healthy. Come the summertime, in our summer, it goes dormant. Even if you're watering it, it just looks scraggy and grotty. But this is the best time to have that. And I have other Anoniums which I'll bring into the house simply because they look their best at this time of year. So I've covered a whole range of plants, and I'll add a few other examples on the little name tags through the video as well, which I hope will help. In terms of space saving, knowing that you can grow plants in different environments within your own house, particularly where you've got less light, I think can be of enormous help. And one other thing that I've done which has been really helpful is on the south-facing windowsill, which frankly is where most of the plants are going to thrive, is you might want to think about putting up some kind of shelving or table or something, just so you can expand your collection a little bit. Anyway, I hope that's been helpful. Please like it, thumbs up, and look forward to seeing you again.